Okay. Thank you guys. Thank you everybody for joining this morning, or afternoon, wherever you may land. It's morning for us here on the West Coast. Um, it looks like we're gonna have somewhat of a quick meeting today. Our agenda is not as long as I was expecting it to be. But yeah, thank you guys. And Diane, go ahead. You can take it away.
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to thank everybody who participated in our scoring survey. This was something that we thought up because A, we want to see if this scoring survey is something we can send to new judges as part of their training so that they start off on the right foot. And then B, we also wanted to find out if our perceptions of our scores are different than what the judge's perception of our scores is. So we sent out, let's see, there was one seed survey, the perennial survey, and then the non-seed survey. So the seed survey was both ornamentals and edibles. And what we want to do is we have quite a few slides, so we wanted to go over them, and there may be some points of discussion. I mean, Jenny and Denise and I have certainly been discussing the results and the recommendations. So I'm going to go through each one, and Denise and Jenny, please speak up if you want to add something else. And at the very end, then we're going to kind of say, well, what if we changed it to be this? And, obviously, what we're doing is trying to not make this process harder for you guys. We're also trying to make it easier for us, easier for the breeders to interpret the results when they get them. So don't think we're doing all this to make your lives harder. We're really trying to make it easier. So let's start by going to the first question, which is kind of across the board. So you plant the entry and its comparisons, you care for all appropriately, have no unusual weather or pest, but the comparisons die. So what do you do? And the answer is you judge the entry on its own merits. Like maybe one or two people said, well, it's a trial failure. It's not a trial failure because the entry didn't die, it was the comparisons. And then you can't just automatically give it a high score because you do have to judge it on its merits. Because let me go back just real quick. I went too fast on that one. So here it is, judge the entry on its own merits. It's not that you automatically give it a high score, and it is not a trial failure in our perception because that entry did survive. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to the next one. The entry is a genus that historically does not do well in your region or climate. You plant the entry in comparison, care for them appropriately, have no unusual weather or pest pressure, yet both the entry and the comparisons die. What should you do? You score it as not adapted. So that is the right answer. It is okay, so one of the things I think somebody had said is, well, why do you even send it to me? And here's one of the reasons is you never know with all the breeding innovations when there might be something that, and I'm trying to think of a good example, all of a sudden a hot pepper will grow really, really well in Quebec. I don't know if that's a good example or not. But this is why we still want everybody to at least attempt it. Don't just assume that it won't do well in your region because AAS is known to be getting some new innovations. So we do want you to continue to try it. So if it is something that you just can't grow, and it certainly proves itself that it does not grow in your region, don't give it a low score, call it not adapted. That's the best option for this scenario. So it's a little gray, a little bit on the edge, but this is what we're going with. Okay. Next question. You plant the entry in its comparison, care for both appropriately, have no unusual weather pressures, but some critters eat both the entry and the comparison plants. What do you do? We are calling this one human error. And part of this is we're wanting to know what happened. We see trial failure as something with the genetics, not that the critters happen to like to eat that one. So we're calling that one human error. And this is one that probably is maybe a little bit controversial, but this is what we're setting the bar with. We do have a little bit of discussion points at the very end. Okay, so it's not the genetics that caused the plant to die. So that's why we're not calling it trial failure. Here's another one. You plant the entry in its comparison, things are going well until somebody forgets to water and all the plants die. That is human error. That is not trial failure. It's not the fault of the genetics. It's not the plant's fault why it died. It is that somebody forgot to water it. So that's our answer on that one. Next one, you successfully propagated, this is for the non-seed trial. You successfully propagated the entry in comparison, but when you go to plant them outdoors, you realize the labels were lost or have been fixed up. It happens. You aren't confident you know which is the entry and which is the comparison. What should you do? Our recommendation, go ahead and plant them in sections as best as possible. I mean, if they really got mixed up, then this is going to be difficult. But we did have this, I'm trying to remember the example, Jenny, where maybe a petunia and we had a solid color and a stripe, but they got mixed up. Well, we were able to tell the judges, okay, when they bloom, the one with the stripe is the entry, the one with the solid color is the comparison. And that's an example because I can't remember exactly. Right. Will there be some times where it's going to be really, really difficult? Yes. But in this case, let's try to do the best thing possible, especially for the non-seed or perennial entries. Then we also have this slide for the seed one. And what you do here kind of depends at what point in the season it is. The answer could be the exact same thing that we said the answer was for the non-seed trial, or depending on how close it is, maybe they were planted in germination flats and weren't labeled and you just have no idea. If it's early enough, you can contact Jenny. When it says the AAS office, your contact is Jenny for replacements. And hopefully that gives you enough time to just start all back over. So, if you're in doubt, just contact Jenny and we'll decide what's best for you in that situation at that time. But if you can, go ahead and plant them, and then we will know once they start blooming or fruiting which is which, then we'll do that. But we do know that sometimes they're so close that that won't be possible. So I guess the biggest message is your assistants, please mark them. Please keep the tags and labels. That will prevent a lot of issues. That was the answer on that one. The URCs or liners were shipped, but you were out of town when they arrived and couldn't plant them in time. What do you do? Contact us, contact Jenny about getting replacements. When it is URCs or liners, we're not sure if we can always get a replacement, but thus far, I think we've been fairly successful. But, we'll contact the breeder, try to get you the replacements. And then you were shipped and out of town, but you didn't realize it until interim final scores. This is for the perennial trial. We're due in November. What do you do? So this one would be scored as a human error. Good trial management is understanding what the entries are, taking a look at your trial, making sure you have all of them, and hopefully you will do that before November. Hopefully you'll do that sometime through the summer. So that's why we're saying this correct answer would be human error. Okay, that was the answer. Then you planted the entries and comparisons at the end of the season. All the entry plants died, but the comparisons live. What do? Give the entry a score that reflects its failure to survive. This one is not, we're not saying it's a trial failure. If it died, but the comparisons lived, then we say you have to score it as such, which will be a low score because it didn't survive. Classic trial result with a score. In the perennial trial, the URCs and or seeds were shipped and were propagated, but subsequently died before being planted outdoors. Again, contact Jenny, contact the AAS office for replacements if time allows. And on the perennial trial, Sometimes it may be that you are trialing it only for 2 winters, or 2 summers even, which is okay. That's better than having a complete trial failure. We would rather trial it for fewer seasons than not at all. Next one, URCs or liners died before you could plant them outdoors. Same answer. Contact the AAS office immediately for replacement if time allows. And again, it depends on the genus and the time of year, etc. Always communicate with us so that we can decide what to do. This one, the entry is entered in the AAS Winter Series Trial category. The entry and the winter comparison both perform very well. The only difference is the color, which you don't care for. What should you do? And so the right answer is score it equal to the series comp, because it is equal. It's just a subjective thing on your side about the color. And I think, Denise, you were going to make some points here to talk about noting color hues, etc.
Yeah, because color is one of those things that oddly enough, I find myself in a lot of debates about sometimes. So the subjectivity factor that Diane is talking about is, there's a lot of colors people don't necessarily care for. I think what you need to make note of is the saturation of the color. Maybe, if it's a scarlet or a red, to denote whether it's more orange in hue versus blue in hue, because I know that actually matters to some people in some markets. Um, and also like noting the fact of whether it fades. That's kind of an issue as well. So more objectivity on the color of the flower versus, whether or not you like pink or purple kind of thing.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, now another question about the AAS Winter Series trial. So it's a new color in the series. The color is amazing. You love it. But everything else about the entry performance is much worse than the AAS Winter comparison. So you have an AAS Winter, and there's another one that they've come out with that's a new color. So what do you do there? In this case, you have to score it poorer than the series comp. Maybe it's a great new color, but it gets disease, or it doesn't have near as many flowers, or whatever it was. So you have to say, well, this is a great new color, but it just doesn't live up to the series. So you have to score it as such. Here's another one about the AAS series trial. So this would be the non-AAS winter series trial. So there's a new color. And for this particular one, we're talking about the non-seed trial. The entry color is nice, and the entry and the anonymous series comparison perform equally. However, the named comparison outperforms both. What should you do? And pretty much everybody had the right answer. Is the because remember, on the series we asked for 2 scores, right? So you would say it's equal to the series comp, but you would say not as good as the named comparison. So in other words, this is not going to become an AAS winner. Jenny, do you want to say something about one of our concerns about our series trial scoring that we'll discuss at the end?
Well, we're not sure if we've made it a little complicated on the series trial. It's the reason we started the series trial was because we were getting comparisons that were part of a series, and the judges were saying, well, it's not outperforming the comparison, which is true, but that doesn't always necessarily mean it shouldn't be an AAS winner. So that's kind of the background of why we started these kind of series trials. But now we're wondering if in Mercado and in your scoring, if it's complicated on how you should approach these scores. So we just wanted to talk about
so
other alternatives.
Be thinking about that, because we'll at the end of this we'll talk about that one a little bit, because in reality we're asking you for 2 scores, and then we have to sit here in the office and go, is it a winner or not? So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. Okay, so now there was some specific questions just about the perennial trial. and we're doing this for each trial. You plant the entry in its comparison, care for both appropriately, have no unusual weather or pest pressures. A good number of both survived the first and second winters, but none that survived the third winter. What should you do? So what we're suggesting, whoops. Oh, I didn't have it right there. So what we're suggesting you do is you assign it a final score based on the 3 successful growing season that you did have. And please note in your comments, you can say a short-lived perennial if you feel like that's appropriate. And then this one also on the perennial trial, looks like everybody got this one right. You received, planted, and evaluated the entries and comparisons over 3 summers, but then something happened. You cannot evaluate in June. What do? Same answer, assign it a final score based on the 3 successful seasons you had. So that just reiterates that. Next one, you plant the entry in its comparison, care for both appropriately, have no unusual weather pressures, but critters eat half of both the entry and comparison plants. What do? You just continue to judge the entry against the comparison, just like you would if all of them had survived. And we will reiterate, it is very important. Please do everything you can to have a successful trial, especially on the perennial trial. I know that it goes over 3 years, but this is important in determining the winners and giving this information back to the breeders. Here's another one, entry comparison. Things are going well until you discover some well-meaning maintenance employee sprayed the trial bed with herbicide and all the plants died. That's human error. That's not a trial failure. It doesn't have anything to do with the genetics unless we want all plants to survive herbicides. So that would be human error. And let's just keep track of Mr. Sprayer next time. You plant the entry in its comparison. Things are going well until the trial garden floods and all the plants die. What should you do? This is a trial failure, but we're thinking that we need to adapt a little, something about our scoring, and we're going to talk about that at the end. So just keep this in mind that, yeah, a flood is a trial failure, but it's not human error and it's not genetic. So we've got some ideas that we want to bring forth at the end of this. You're a new AAS judge in the perennial trial. So you're taking over. Your predecessor had entered scores for year 1 and 2 and/or 1 or 2. But when you start judging, you can't find the entries and comparisons. What do? Score it as a human error. Again, it's not the genetics if you can't find them or if you can't find the notes or anything. This is part of good trial management for anybody who is a perennial trial judge. Please have an assistant. Please keep track of where these scores are so that you can pass that on. Again, very important for us here at AAS to have a good perennial trial. Now there was just a couple on seed trials. It looks like this was pretty much unanimous. You started your entry and comparisons, but something didn't germinate. What do? Contact the office, and you have to start them all over. Remember, we want you to start them at the same time so that you're seeing things at the same progression and time frame. Next question, you started the entry and comparison indoors. When you go to transplant them, you realize you were supposed to direct sow. What should you do? We want you to contact the office for replacement seeds so that you can direct sow. This is where it's really important to look on that entry form as to how that breeder wanted you to start them. There's a really good reason why they might want you to do direct sow or germinate and transplant. And then you're an in-ground trial judge, but you just decide you want to plant half the entries and comparisons in containers. One of the entries is amazing in-ground, which is the trial it was supposed to be in, but a real flop. That says flop, you can't read it. In the containers, what should you do? You score it based on the in-ground performance only. There is a reason the breeder didn't want it trialed in containers. And just FYI, if this became a winner, then we would not say that it was good for containers. So try to cover all of those when we're promoting the AAS winners. And then the entry was entered into the trial specifically of great disease resistance. And disease resistance is listed as the only trait to judge. The entry does live up to its disease resistance claims. However, the color, habit, taste, etc. is not as impressive and falls short of the performance you expect of an AAS winner. What should you do? This is the common sense aspect. So because the color, habit, taste, etc. is not as impressive, you want to score it below average or even poor. I mean, it's great that it has good disease resistance, but let's just say if it's a tomato and tastes horrible and only puts on 2 or 3 tomatoes, then we don't want it to be an AAS winner. So there are some times where you have to use your common sense, your subjectivity, your expertise to kind of override if the breeder has said, oh, only judge this one thing. Okay. The entry is entered in the non-AAS winner series trial as a new color. We've talked about that. The entry and the anonymous series comparison perform equally, and they both outperform the named comparison. However, you would not deem any of them worthy of an AAS award. So this is the one where you score it not as good as the series comp. And again, you guys are experts. This is why we approve you as a judge. So you're looking at it and saying, well, yeah, it did do just as good as the series, and it did better than this named comparison, but I don't think the named comparison is worthy. I don't think either one of these. So your expertise comes into play and says, not as good, because we don't want the things that are not as good out there as AAS winners. Okay, moving on. I think we only have a couple more. Again, the non-AAS winner series trial, new color in the series, the entry and the anonymous series comparison perform equally, and they both outperform the named comparison. Isn't that the same thing? Oh, that's the seed and that's the non-seed. Oh, I wanted to keep both slides. Now I remember why we kept both slides in here. Because we just wanted to show the broad span of answers that people put in. This says to us, our series trial needs a little work on the judging, and that's why we have some questions for you. So that's why we put both in here for the seed and the non-seed. Are we almost there? Do we want to talk about this one first before we talk about trial failures? Because we're almost at the end. Okay, so we're here. So you can turn on your microphones, and those of you that have experience, or those of you who want to have experience with the series trial, specifically the non-AAS winners trial scoring, did you have any suggestions, Jenny, on maybe what we might be able to do? You know, there are some limitations we have with Mercado, but I think it comes down to one of the things is, you know, just showing you here the different scenarios and what people were thinking. I'm going to go back to show those. Like this one, what we think is the right answer, nobody said. And so it kind of, I don't want to push things through as an AAS winner if they're truly not performing. So do you have any suggestions on how we might change our scoring, or anybody else can bring up their ideas as well?
I think right now what we're looking at too is we ask the question before you guys assign number scores, we ask, should it get an AAS award, yes or no? And so we're kind of having to decipher what we think you're intending by how you answer that question. So if you say no, but then your scores make it seem like, oh, maybe it would be a winner, we're kind of going with the yes, no question as like the tiebreaker.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think that has happened before. And I've had to get in touch with some judges. You know, they say, yes, it should be an AAS winner, but then the score is like 1 or 2, or flip flop. The score is a 3 or 4, but then they say it shouldn't be an AAS winner. So I think one thing, even if we don't change our scoring system, is to make them match. if you're pretty passionate about it, you think it's really good, make those two scores match. Like, yes, it should be an AS winner, so I'm giving it a 4. No, I don't think it should be an AS winner, so I'm giving it a 1 or 2. Sorry, I'm going to look at chat. I just saw something pop up. Oh, never mind. Okay. So
Did you see what Jesse said, Diane,
yep,
in the
I
chat?
found it. And that is what I do. Score according to the claims, but indicate yes or no. Okay, good. Somebody said they did. Okay, I would do that too. Agreed. Okay, so for now, this is what we're saying is on the non-AS Winter Series trial, just make sure your scores match. If you think it should be an AAS winner, then say yes and give it the equivalent numeric score. If you say no, give it an equivalent numeric score. I think that just making that clear is we're good to go there. Okay, and then the last one is about trial failures. Do you want to take this over, Jenny?
So what we've noticed is that in Mercado, we have some options. If you're not giving a number score, we have X, trial failure. We have HE, human error. We have N, not adapted. We have D, did not receive or could not plant. And then we have a late score and an own entry. However, we're not sure, based on some of the comments that we read on people explaining their scores, it seems a lot of times people click trial failure, but then go on to explain that, oh, they had a drought, or oh, they had a flood, or oh, other things that happened that in our heads would not be a trial failure score. So we were wondering if we changed your scoring options to a trial failure due to genetics would be one option, and then a trial failure for kind of everything else would be a second option for you to choose, because we also don't know at the end of the day, like right now, if you're going out to your gardens and looking at stuff and you just see that they're not alive and you don't remember exactly what happened or everything that led to not being able to give it a number score, is it easier for you as judges to have just those two options instead of, are we giving you too many options, and is it kind of making your job harder?
Right. So we would love to hear from you as far as what if we kind of did away with HENA, DNR, etc., and had just a Z, and then we kept the X and making that genetics, because right away we and the breeder can say, oh, okay, well, out of 30 some trial sites, there was only one due to genetics. There were other trial failures, but that wasn't due to genetics. But we will continue to ask you, if you use X or Z, to please explain in the judge comments. And that's very important for many other reasons, but we need to know what happened if it's a trial failure of any sort. So we welcome your comments, suggestions. Okay, Bernadette likes just 2 options. That's in addition to your numeric scores, by the way. I don't want to make you think that.
We're only expecting failures.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Okay. Okay, Denise.
Diane, would you give some examples of what you would consider trial failure due to genetics? Because I think in my mind, trial failure meant that the trial itself did not come through to completion, which would be because of the things like drought and critters and whatever else. Can you speak to what example would fall under the failure due to genetics part?
Personally, I don't think that would be used much. Now, what if the breeder got the seed mixed up and sent something that was not what you were supposed to get? Because I know once or twice it's happened where two judges are saying, well, what I got was definitely not what was defined, because maybe somebody mixed up seed packets. If a comparison survived, but the entry did not, and it's not because of watering or flooding or human error, then it's almost like you can say, oh my gosh, all these pansies did well except the entry. To me, that would be an X. Because if there's nothing else that you can identify as to why it failed, and I don't know if that's a good example, but that's my thoughts and seeing what we see over the years.
I do recall there was a seed entry one year that a lot of judges contacted me saying they didn't germinate. And so to me, that would be a fair one to say, well, that was a trial failure due to genetics. Like they couldn't get it to even.
It didn't germinate.
So
whereas the comparisons
did.
So yeah, failure to germinate would be another one. And I see Denise also wrote disease pathogen issues or weakness in the overall plant, weak stems. Maybe it says, oh, we get flower heads this big, but they all break off. Well, that's genetics, and that would be if it actually flowered, then you're going to score it low. That probably wouldn't be quite as much of a trial failure, but we would certainly understand it as long as you put that in the comments, put the explanation there.
Okay, thanks, Diane. I think where I was thinking of it was kind of like you just mentioned, like if it didn't perform to the described expectation, then it would be below average or poor, or not necessarily that it was a failure because it didn't look like it was advertised.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense to me. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I see that Pam wrote that the verbena failed to germinate twice. They tried twice. Mark said same thing for them, but whereas the comparison succeeded. Oh my gosh, third time was a charm. Wow. Well, for Bernadette, I would say that you're going to have to score it with that consideration. But yeah, I think if it just doesn't germinate that many times, I would call that an entry failure, which would be a trial failure. So, okay, well, that was the results of our scoring survey. I'm very happy that we did it. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. We're going to have this survey. We're going to tweak it a little bit and then use it for new judges so that, it's very clear right at the beginning of you score this way and this way and this way and this way. So, okay. So let me take that down the screen. I think, Jenny, you were going to talk about the next thing on our agenda.
With the photos?
Yeah, or is that me?
That was you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I didn't have my name by it. This is where we're asking you to upload your photos. I call them strange anomalies or failures or great successes. Because maybe you're seeing something and it can only be explained through a photo, and that something could be good or bad. So please keep that in mind, that those are very, very helpful to us and the breeders. Some of those success things, if you say like, oh my gosh, look at this flower right next. When we had, it was either Mango Tango or Superhero Spry, somebody sent in a photo of entry, comparison, just the flower, because they were like, the flower size was so much larger. I use that photo all the time in presentations because I want to show people what it takes to be an AAS winner. If you're a vegetable judge and you get this whole crop of jalapeno peppers at one time and the next plant only had 3 and the next plant only had 4, make piles and take pictures of them. Those are very, very helpful. So either great successes or anomalies, send us those pictures. Now it's your turn.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take off the screen.
Okay. So I just wanted to remind everyone that trial scores are due in Mercado on October 1st. So if you can go in and make sure you're entering your final scores and the final observation rounds, you might need to sync your Mercado app to download the final observation rounds. I see that not everybody has downloaded those yet for all the trials. So October 1st for all of the annual trials, November for the perennial, all years of the perennial trials, please enter your final interim year score for this year for all the ones you have in the works. And then next week, I will send out the judge verification link. If you remember, that is the link that you need to click on to verify, make sure we have the trials correct that you are planning to judge for 2026. Make sure your address is correct, all your information, your judge assistants' names, etc. We did add last year a separate field for you to add the email you want to use for Mercado. It's much, much easier for us here to set up Mercado in February with the email address that you want to be used for the season. It's harder to change once I set that up, and people coming in midstream in like July wanting to change the Mercado email address, it gets really tricky. So if everybody could make sure, if you want an assistance email, a general email that everybody in your department has access to, whatever, we don't care what email is used, but just one per judge.
One per judge, and let us know before Jenny has all the Mercado information set up for next year.
And then also in that verification, it's really important we ask you to sign off on the material transfer agreement, some other agreements for perennial and non-seed, and yeah, just sign and date everything so that we're all covered for the year.
And if you're thinking that you do want to change any of the trials you're doing, you know, this is the time to get in touch with Jenny about that, to make any changes if you want to increase or decrease any, or if it's time for you to hand it off to somebody else, let Jenny know and we can shift everything around. You know, they will have to fill out a judge application. So yeah, communicate. And one other thing about scores due October 1st, you know, you may wonder why we have it for October 1st. Our timeline is extremely tight. There are things that you have judged in 2025 that some of these breeders really want to jump on it quickly, and they want to accept the award in November. If we don't get those scores in time, you know, because we need all the judges' scores, because that last score may make or break it from being an AAS winner, and I have to get all this done. I'm supposed to let the breeders know by October 10th. So we need all the scores in, we have to do the calculations, and then we have to contact all the breeders by October 10th. Taking out weekends, that does not give us much time. That's why we asked for an October 1st date. I realize that there are some things like squash, pumpkins, etc., that may have a later score. Totally understandable. That breeder knows they will not get their scores in time to accept November. That's okay. But I'm going to say 95, 99% of the entries those breeders want to know in case they want to accept the award in November. So that's why we ask for them at the time we do. That's why we start nagging you. And I'm sorry, we're both nice people, but there are times where we do have to nag. So please keep that October 1st deadline in mind. That's 2 days away.
Yep. And also for anything that you need extra time, there is a late score option. Please put in the L for that variety and then just sync all of your other scores. We can wait on the couple that you need more time for, but we still need your scores
for
synced.
Everything else. And yeah, put those scores in and sync. Yes. And by the way, if Jenny contacts you, think you've synced, and Jenny contacts you, there's a reason. She doesn't email everybody. She emails only the people where it's not synced. So if you get an email from Jenny, it means that something didn't sync, even though you think it did. So try it again, push that refresh button. It's a little circle arrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's all of our nagging, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to end our nagging. But by the way, I want to tell all of you guys that today is Jenny's 10th anniversary of being with All America Selections and National Garden Bureau. So thank you, Jenny. And it's also Gail's 10th anniversary, but she's not here on this thing. So we're thanking them for 10 years. Denise, I think you were going to wrap this up by talking about future meetings and how we're going to change things up for 2026.
Yeah. So first and foremost, we are 2 weeks away from our International Plant Trialing Conference, which is super exciting. I hope all of you guys are going to be able to make it, or at least, most of you guys. I think we can still accept, you can still apply until next week, Monday on the 6th. Is that correct, Diane?
Yes, Monday the 6th. It is the later registration fee, and you probably will not be able to get the same room rate. There's plenty of other hotels around if they're sold out, but if you want to sign up last minute, we'll take your registration. We've got plenty of room for you.
Yep, super exciting. So like Diane was saying, the future of our judges meetings, we're kind of starting to think about how we can expand on all of the events that happen across the United States during the summer months, or during the year, I should say, and how we can incorporate travel for a lot of us that do that along with some of these locations. So like ASTA being held, isn't ASTA usually held down in
It,
Florida?
it flip-flops. One year is
Okay.
Florida, the next year is somewhere in California. So let's see.
Okay.
Even years, ASTA is in, I'll just say the West Coast, and then odd years, it's in Florida, typically in
And
Florida.
it's usually like Feb, right? January, February. Same with Mance or TPIE. Mance is usually up in Baltimore, Maryland. TPIE is down in Florida, but those are both January events. Cultivate every year in Ohio in July is a really good big place. A lot of things are happening there. We've had a lot of meetings there before, so we're thinking about different ideas of how we can incorporate Cultivate. And then the Canadian Greenhouse Conference was another conversation. And where's that held at, Diane? I don't know if I know where that is.
In Toronto. Oh, sorry,
Right.
Denise. ASTA is American Seed Trade Association.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's for a lot of the seed
Ve- yeah.
companies
And veggies, right?
and veggies, yes.
Yeah.
And then Canadian Greenhouse Conference is in October and it's held in the Toronto area. So what we're wanting to do is have a chance for judges to get together and network. And then at the same time, we'll give you updates, like this is happening with All American Selections. This is happening with National Garden Bureau.
Yeah.
So we will be finalizing these probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then we'll send something out so you can put it on your calendar to kind of know the date and the time of when and where we will be having these meetings in 2026. So that's to say that we will not have a summer summit in 2026. This will be our substitute. Just like this year, the International Plant Trialing Conference is a substitute, and next year, the smaller regional events.
Yep. Correct.
And Alex just said it's in the Niagara Falls Convention Center.
Oh,
So for 2025, it's next week. So October, yeah, it's always like the first full week of October.
yep. Exactly. And I feel like this concludes our meeting for today, correct? Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, Diane, Jenny?
I think we want to let everybody get back in their fields and do their Mercado trials personally.
Yes, for sure. Well, we thank you guys for attending this morning. And I hope you have a great rest of your week and happy Monday again.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.